In Lesson 12, we will be multiplying and dividing fractions. Remember, as you view the tape, take careful notes. If I explain a concept or do a problem that you don't understand, stop the tape and get some help. Let's begin with multiplication. Let's think about what it means to multiply 3/4 times 4. If we didn't know how to do the multiplication, but we remembered how to add, we could do it like an adding problem. We're really adding 3/4 4 times. So if we think about how we add 3/4 4 times, remember when we're adding, we must have a common denominator. Our common denominator is 4, and then we add the numerator. So if we added up all of our numerators, 3, 6, 9, 12, we would have 12 fours, which would divide out to be 3. So our answer to 3/4 times 4 has to be 12 fours. So what we're going to actually do, if you'll look at how we could get that answer by multiplying, we can put a 1 under the 4 to make it look like a fraction. And you see the way we'd multiply it out to get the 12 fours. We'd say 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 1 gives us 1. 4 times 1 gives us 4. So it appears then that the way we multiply is not to get a common denominator, not in our multiplying, but just to multiply numerator by numerator and denominator by denominator. And that's what our multiplication rule is going to tell us. So let's look at the multiplication rule. The multiplication rule says if you're multiplying A over B times C over D, then you're going to multiply A times C and B times D. So you're going to multiply numerator by numerator, and you're going to multiply denominator by denominator. Now notice I have up here reduce first. It's very important before you start multiplying that you reduce each individual fraction if it's not already reduced, and if you see any common factors in any other numerator or denominator, you should reduce those before you start multiplying. Now we'll look at some examples in just a minute in which we can do some reducing. So it is not necessary to get a common denominator when you multiply. You can multiply just the way things are. Just remember numerator by numerator, denominator by denominator. Let's do a multiplication problem. 5/13 times 13/7. Now remember, I said we need to do any reducing that can be done first. So when we look at this, we notice that there's a 13 in this denominator and a 13 in this numerator. And anytime we see common factors in a numerator or denominator, in a numerator and a denominator, we want to reduce. So I'm going to mark out both of the 13s, because I'm going to say 13 goes into 13 one time, and 13 goes into 13 one time. So then I have left 5 times 1, which gives me 5, and 1 times 7, which gives me 7. So my answer is 5/7. And I'd look at that 5/7 and make sure that it's reduced, but it should be reduced as long as I'd reduced as much as I could before I multiplied. Now let's look at what would have happened if we hadn't reduced first. Let's look at the same problem again. 5/13 times 13/7. So if I decided I didn't want to reduce first, I would say 5 times 13. That gives me 65. And then I'd say 13 times 7, and that gives me 91. Now, I would look at that answer, 65 over 91, and I would think that that was reduced, because you can't look at that just by glancing at it, tell that 13 will go into each part. So what would happen is you would probably miss the problem because you'd stop, and it really wouldn't be reduced because you could divide 13 into this and also 13 into this. And you'd end up with 5 and 7 if you had known the 13 would go into it. So it's very important to do that reducing first. Otherwise, you might get to your answer and not be able to tell what to reduce by, especially when the common factor is a prime number like 13. So please reduce first to make sure you get the right answers. Now let's look at another example. 2/3 times 3/8. Again, we want to do as much reducing as possible before we start to multiply. So if I start to reduce, I can see common factors of 3, so I want to divide 3 into 3, 3 into 3, and leave 1s. Then I can tell that 2 will go into 8. So I'll mark 2 out. Since 2 goes into 2 one time, I'll put a 1. Then I'll mark the 8 out, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. Now if I wanted, I could write what I had left down and look at it before I multiplied. And then multiply numerator by numerator. 1 times 1 gives me 1, and 1 times 4 gives me 4. So my answer would be 1/4. Let's look at another example. 4/5 multiplied by 5/6 multiplied by 10/15. And let's move this one up a little bit so we'll have more room. Now, let's look for common factors. First thing I see is I see some 5s here, so I'm going to go ahead and say 5 into 5 one time, 5 into 5 one time. And then I have to look a little more carefully because I don't see anything else that will go in any numerator that will go into any denominator. So I might think I'm through reducing, but I need to be careful. Look at the 4 and the 6. They will not go into each other, but they do have a common factor. The number 2 will go into both of them. So that's what I want to do. I want to divide 2 into 4 and also into 6. So I'll mark the 4 out and mark the 6 out. Remember, it has to be a numerator and a denominator that you use. And I'll say 2 goes into 4 2 times, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. Okay, then I look at what I have left to see if I can reduce something again. Now I can look over here at the 15 and back at the 2, but 2 will not go into 15. And also use the 10 with the numbers on the bottom. And so I don't see, the 2 and the 1 and the 1 and the 3 will not go into either the 10 or the 15, or you don't get anywhere if you reduce with 1s. But there's one thing I need to be careful about. Look at the fraction 10/15. It's not reduced itself, so I need to reduce it. So I can mark out the 10 and mark out the 15 and divide 5 into both of those. If I divide 5 into 10, I'm left with a 2. If I divide 5 into 15, I'm left with a 3. So now when I write down what I have left, 2 over 1 times 1 over 3 times 2 over 3. Then when I look carefully, I don't see any other common factors with a numerator and a denominator. So I'm ready to multiply. So when I multiply 2 times 1, I get 2 times 2 gives me a 4. Then on the bottom, 1 times 3 gives me 3, and 3 times 3 gives me 9. So my answer is 4/9.